Good afternoon, everybody. How you doing? I hope you're all doing great. Welcome to the Studio Memoirs. Today we're going to be talking about Asia, my time with Asia. As brief as it was, I want to tell you a few stories about that. It's pretty interesting. I think first and foremost, though, you got to understand something is that I was actually on some of the early Asia demos. You see, John Wetton called me in with Carl Palmer. There was John Wetton, Carl Palmer, and we were recording, I think we were recording Eat Me in St. Louis. I think it was around about that time. And he called me in, and of course I was drinking back then, and I was a bit whacked, I was a bit of a nut job back then, and some would say I still am, but that's all right. And so, but I think, like I thought I was going in to do like UK and stuff like that, and so, but what John and them wanted, they wanted a big American, they kept on talking about the American market. So I think that was when they were either recording the second album. I don't know. I think it was maybe I reckon it must have been like 90 or something, 1990, something like that. I don't know when Asia come out, but anyway, that was that. So I was on the first demos, I think, and I did the demos, and I think they weren't so much looking for a guitar player as just somebody to come and bring ideas for that album, and so I did that. And I guess they got a record deal and all that stuff from it. I mean, I was offered it bites at the time. But that's an interesting story, right? I think that, I don't know, before any of this happened, I was on the Asia First demos. I love that. And then I met John, John Wetton to me, in particular, was always, a genius in my mind. I absolutely loved his voice, his bass playing. I remember hearing him on Burlesque by Family. Boom, 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 boom. It was just, what a sound he had. He had a killer sound. And all his stuff with like UK, with Brufford and all that stuff, and all them In the Dead of Night, and and then that Danger Money album they did with with Eddie and Teddy Bozio. I mean, that was just that incredible stuff. So John, and the thing that really stands out for me with John, that puts him apart from everybody else, is his sense of melody. He always had a beautiful sense of melody. He was a bit he was like the prog Paul McCartney or something, it's like that. And so, I always loved John. I love all them guys anyway, because they're all my heroes growing up. But it was weird a few years ago. I stopped drinking around about, I think it was like 1992 or something like that. It was just after that stuff, actually. I was starting to just get out of control at that point. And it was just, it was like once you start going down that path and you're doing like, it's rock and roll, and I'm living in Los Angeles and I'm fucking rock, and they're doing all that stuff. I'm some young kid from like Cumbria, and I'm involved in all that, and I don't want to do that shit. And so I'd been sober for a year or two, and I got a call from John. He gave me a call. He was having trouble with same thing with the booze and all that stuff. And so I sponsored him in the AA program for a little while, which was pretty interesting. I used to love AA. Dude, AA, you should just go there anyway. It's killer. It's all these like great stories of people, it's a fantastic environment. I love it. Some people are kind of like, oh my God, I don't want to go there. And it wasn't like that for me. My first time at AA, I was taken by Steve Jones from the Pistols. I'll tell you that story another time. Jonesy, I used to hang out with Jonesy in Los Angeles all the time. But anyway, that's another story. But so John called me up because he knew I was sober. And I wasn't particularly, I was only like 2 years sober at that point in myself. So I didn't really, I wasn't, I'm very good at that stuff now. I can help people easy now. And I think my temperament was a bit harsh for John as well, because I'm an old Capricorn boy, so I'm driven. Like I don't have a lot of empathy, in me like that. I'll give empathy for where, like when really bad things happen to people. Like I'm totally up for that. But the general thing of like my feelings and like that stuff, I'm not good at that stuff, dude. I'm more like Stalin, than I am like Jimmy Carter. But my friend Stephen Harris, he's like Jimmy Carter. Stephen's like the understanding, and he's a Cancerian, so he's like nice and gentle and soft and all that. So I said to John, why don't you talk to my friend Stephen? Because first of all, Stephen had a lot more time than I had, and he, Stephen was only a year behind me. So I think John, I'm sure he enjoyed talking to Stephen a bit more than he enjoyed talking to me. not that, I don't mean we had like a falling out or anything. It wasn't. I don't mean like that. It was just that, you know, some people. He was. I think he was looking for a more gentler approach. You know, and he ended up with Stalin, which is not a good thing. You know, and but you know, in the nicest possible way. John used to come to my gigs all the time when I play solo gigs. He'd come down to the gigs. He'd always come and see me, John. So I loved old John. It was, you know, dreadful loss, you know, for that. But then he was, lo and behold, you know, after all that, and then, you know, John passed, and that, like, it was last year, I think, 2025, I'm sitting in the house, and I'd had a rough few years. You know, after the COVID thing, you have to learn to adapt again, you know what I mean? You've got to adapt everything. And so I'm sitting in the house, I got a phone call from John Payne. Now, John was doing the other Asia. Now, I know the other lot from Chris Braid, right? Jeff Downs and Chris Braid, and I know them because I've played on their records. I know that lot, so I know the Asia stuff. Asia wasn't on my radar at all, like not in the slightest. So I don't know the politics of it. I don't know what's going on with it. I don't know whatever. But I got a phone call from John Payne, who I'd never met before. I obviously heard of him, but and we just hit it off. I was talking to him on the phone. I love John, and to this day, I love John. To this day, great guy, really great guy. I love him. Very talented bastard as well. And we got talking. Hey, would you like to, you know, write a few songs, maybe play some guitar? I don't know how it transpired, but I ended up, you know, saying, yeah, I'll do a few dates with you. I thought it was a call from God, because I thought God had went like, look at that poor fat bastard sitting around that house all the time, like doing this stuff and blah. Let's get him out the house and send him off on tour. And John said, you want to come and do a few dates with us before Christmas? And I go, yeah, that'll be totally cool. You know, I'm doing that whole thing. I didn't know I don't know any Asia's music. I've never heard it before, right? So I don't know what I'm in for. So I'm thinking like, fucking Steve Howe, I can do all that shit. That's no problem. And so he sends me this stuff and I start listening to some of it, but he didn't send me the heavy stuff. He sent me like, you know, Heat of the Moment and stuff like that. And I'm like, all right, you know, totally cool. And also the stuff that John had recorded after Steve Howe and all that, that was stuff that was easy to play as well. But then he sent me about 3 or 4 tracks from Asia, which were just like insane. Now, Steve Howe's parts, you know, like you've got to understand, they're not like proper guitar parts. They're just, all it is one solo, like all the way through every song, right? So, and John wanted it exact, which I understand because I'm the same with It Bites. So it isn't like I'm not, you know, but I just didn't realise what was involved in that. And so not only was it involved to the tune of like an ant's nest, it was also, some of it was like, it was all played up the top of the neck, and I've got great big fat fingers. So you don't hear me playing up there a lot. I'm always kind of like around here. My fingers won't do it. And so I'm sitting there thinking, how can I do this? And I worked the parts out, which were quite weird to work out as well. He's got a weird style, Steve Howe. But it's one thing to work a part out right. It's one thing to work a guitar, and then it's another thing to play it right the way through. So when I learned it, I just dropped in. I was dropping in, and, you know, so I could have reference to it. And I'd just drop in, I'd play like maybe about 8-10 seconds, and I'd be like, all right, and I'd work the next bit out, and I'd go to. But then you've got to play the whole thing, you know, and you've got to know it. You can't just remember it, you've got to know it. Now, at this point, you know, you've got to understand that you actually don't really, you know, like Steve Howe plays that stuff, right? So that's like natural for Steve Howe. That's what he does. Jeff Beck couldn't play Steve Howe stuff. Neither could Jimmy Page. Jimi Hendrix couldn't play Steve Howe stuff. Do you know what I mean? There's guitarists who have their own thing going on. Steve Hackett couldn't play Steve Howe stuff. He just couldn't do it. John McLaughlin couldn't play Steve Howe stuff. Because that's not what they do, you know what I mean? Alan Allsworth couldn't play that. He couldn't play Steve Howe stuff. Eddie Van Halen couldn't play Steve Howe stuff. B.B. King couldn't play Steve Howe stuff. You know, it's really particular to Steve Howe, you know what I mean? Like, it's a real particular thing. So it's, you know, it's not a case of, you know, there are guitar players out there who can play Steve Howe stuff. That's what they do. That's what they're good at. They mimic people. They often don't have a thing of their own. They don't have their own thing, but they can do other people's stuff like incredibly well, like really well. And I'm not one of them. Right? I'm not one of them. I can't. I just can't. I just got my own thing going on, and you know the way that I play. I play. So I'm thinking I'm going down there. I'm going to learn a few, you know, in the heat of the moment and play my own solo. But John says no. We want the solo exact, again, which I understand. And so now I'm up shit creek. I'm just like, damn, this is. And so I had the kids for the summer, and I'm trying to learn these tunes, and it's just like. And then he sends me another batch, and I'm just like, fucking hell. So now I've got like 20 songs of Asia, right? And this gig's coming closer and closer all the time, and I'm thinking, fucking hell. You know, I'm thinking, damn. And I'll tell you another thing. Like what's an interesting thing as well is that I actually thought I could help John. I thought I could really help him because he was going to revamp Asia. So I went in there with that kind of attitude of like going, you know, being his buddy and kind of like fighting ideas at him to how to revamp Asia and things like that. That's not what John wanted. John wanted a guitar player for the tour. That's what he wanted. And so I was in it in the wrong capacity anyway. But I wanted to help the guy. Like I really did. I was really, because John's a real talented guy. Like he's a seriously talented guy, and he's an incredibly nice guy as well. He's a fucking really nice guy, John. I've got a lot of time for him. I like him. You know, he's just one of them. I just like him. I can't help it. I just like him. And I kind of miss him a bit, old John. I used to talk to him every day, and I don't get to speak to him anymore now. It was kind of that kind of sucks. But anyway, so I'm learning the Steve Howe stuff, and I go down. You know, I go down to Las Vegas. Actually, no, let me back up a bit. So I'm doing this stuff, and I'm thinking like, this is just wild, man. This is because I you know, the other thing is when you're 63, you can't remember stuff. So I'm thinking, you know, I'd fucking forgot how the heat of the moment went, right? It's the easiest chords I couldn't remember, and so I had this massive like thing on my brain where I just couldn't remember anything at that point. My friend Topo, the pilot, he tells me there's this thing when they go in the simulator, they're in the simulator, and then they have this thing where they'll make something go wrong with the wing, and then there's a procedure to do that, and then they'll make something go wrong with the lights at the back, and there's a procedure to do that, and then they just progressively make things go wrong until the point where you just max out. Your brain can't actually take any more, and that's where I was at with this Asia stuff. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't remember it. And so I go down there, and and I thought, well, maybe if I just get in the room with the band and I play a bit, and I go and, you know, but I just couldn't, even in rehearsals, I couldn't remember it, and and there was a few songs where it was just, I couldn't bring myself to play it spontaneously on the spot. There's one of the solos, I can't remember which song it is, it's absolutely fucking wild, but he's way up the top. It's just some shit like that, and the way he plays it, I was trying to emulate the way he plays it, because most of the guitar players I was listening to online weren't playing it right. They were doing it wrong. They weren't playing it right. It sounded kind of like it, but it wasn't what Steve Howe was doing. Steve was playing it in a particular way, so I was trying to do that. No chance. And so I get down there, and we did a gig. The rehearsals weren't very good at all. I was terrible in rehearsals. Absolutely awful. And then I did the gig, and it was the worst gig I've ever played in my life, I think. I just had a complete blackout on my brain. I wasn't even playing. I had all these notes. I was just looking at notes and going like, second chorus, third time through, do the thing, A, B, C. Next one is A, C, B. Put delay on. Do the, it was just like that. It was like this like fucking exam. And I'll tell you what, if it wasn't for John being so good at what he does, and I mean this because he's fucking good. Like John, he just, you know, he completely dominated the whole thing, and if it wasn't for that, I think we would have got booed off because of what I was playing. If they had listened to me, they got booed off. I honestly, I didn't even know what song I was playing. I literally didn't know what fucking song I was playing. Like it would say like, you know, Military Man, and I'm thinking, which one is that? Is that starting G? Does that start in E? I saw that was a fucking nightmare. And I'll tell you one of the things. So I just wasn't up to the capacity. You know, some jobs I've done where I'm more than capable of doing things, you know, where it just takes off really well. You know, like a lot of the stuff I've done, but there's a few that you go and do that I just couldn't do them. You know what I mean? And I feel really bad to this day a bit that I couldn't help John. I really do. I feel like I let him down a bit. But I actually couldn't practice or do any more. It wasn't a case of that. It was just, I just couldn't remember it. You know, I just couldn't fucking remember it. It wouldn't go in. It wouldn't go in, and I wasn't man enough for the job. That was it. You know, sometimes you're just not man enough for the job. I've had a few of them in my time where you just, you know, sometimes you're man enough for the job and you go in, you know. But I think I'm on like about a 15% ratio of 85% I've been man enough for the job, and 15, the Genesis singer, I wasn't man enough for the job, and the Asia guitar player wasn't man enough for the job. I don't think I've been man. I think there's only one more, John Mellencamp. Oh, that's a great story. I'll tell you that later on. But I wasn't man enough for the job, yeah, with that. But all the others, I was man enough for the job. But this, the Asia one was, you know. But what are you going to do? That's what happens. But I feel bad that I just couldn't help John. I wanted to help him because I just resurrected It Bites as well. So I kind of knew I'd been thinking about that a lot. You know, all the type of stuff that he was having to deal with. I thought, yeah, I've done that. You should try this or try that. But that's not what John wanted. And you know, I guess in hindsight, I should have just shut up and just said I couldn't do it, I think. But I did want to do it. I really did want to do it. I just, you know, was man enough for the job. You know. But I think there's very few people who are man enough for that job. That's a whacked out job. If you know, you've got to kind of dedicate yourself to that. You know what I mean? Like if you want to play every single solo that Steve Howe did note for note and play every single thing he did with the, like you got to be dedicating your life to Steve Howe. And you know me, people, at 63 years old, there's no fucking way on this planet that I'm dedicating my life to Steve Howe. That ain't how it goes down here. And so, you know, I've got my own thing going on. So, but John Payne, fucking incredibly talented guy. Great guitar player, actually. Proper guitar player. I will say that. Proper guitar player. Straight into the amp, no fucking fuzz pedal. Just proper guitar player. Proper blues stuff. You know. You know, I do feel that I let John down a bit. You know, but I actually, between me and you, just, you know, to have a bit of humility, I just couldn't do it. And I couldn't remember it, so I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't have done anything different. Like, I wouldn't have known. You know, it wasn't like because I was drinking or I was partying or I wasn't paying attention or I wasn't, it just wouldn't go in. And I just, you know, and some of it I just couldn't play consistently over and over again. It was just too much. Like the bridge was one way, the second bridge was another, and the third bridge was another. And the chorus was different than the thing. And he brings that, it was just like, I think Steve Howe must go in when he records and just plays whatever the fuck he wants. And then you've got to figure that out. And the last thing I'll say is this: it's like when you get any tribute band or anybody who's filling in for somebody like that, you don't get the luxury of being mediocre. You know, you just don't, because the artists themselves do. Like if you hear Peter Gabriel, Genesis, say like on The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, I mean, that wasn't exactly perfect, you know, but he has the luxury of being Peter Gabriel, so he can do what the fuck he wants. But if you're going to go on with a tribute band, like the guys from the Musical Box, and you're going to emulate Peter Gabriel, it better sound like the record. Do you know what I mean? So Steve Howe's not precise anyway. Steve Howe's like all over the fucking place. Like he's barely making his own shit. And so, but you've got to go in and you've got to do that better than he does it. Because if you did it like he does it, you get fired. You know? But that was that. It was a great time with John. I love John. I hope he's forgiven me for it. I think he has. I don't think he hates me or anything like that. But I do love old John. And he's an incredibly talented guy. And I really, really wish I could have helped him and did better than I did. But sometimes you have to have the humility to say, you're not man enough for the job. When I went home, I was on the way home and he gave me a call. He said, Francis, he said, you're not fucking man enough for the job. I said, John, I agree. It took me like 8 milliseconds to go, I agree. I don't want to do it. And then I whipped myself over the back like I was going, you're a bad man, Francis Dunnery. You're a bad man. Self-flagellation. But that's it. Bit of humility goes a long way with you people. Don't worry about it. It's all fucking good stuff. I'll press that subscribe button. I'm doing good. I'm over 3,000 now. I'm doing pretty good. I say I'm man enough for this job, for the YouTube job. Fucking man enough for that. That's my Asia story. Keep watching. I'm releasing one of these every Monday while I'm away on tour. So I will see you soon. God bless you guys. Go check out my website, francisdunnery.com. Check out the tour dates and also go and have a look at my new album on Bandcamp. It's a nice album. It's very unpretentious. It's like a few little nice little country songs and stuff. It's good. I'll see you soon. God bless you all. Have a great day. Thank you.